I want to thank everyone for being here. This is kind of exciting for me to talk about Ge Heng because he's part of the school that I study with. But many of you know I study with Jeffrey Yuan, and his school is the Yu Qing Huang Lao. Hi. Right. So Yu Qing means jade purity. Huang is for Huang Di, Lao is for Lao Tzu, and Pai is school. So this school is supposed to go back to the Yellow Emperor, to Lao Tzu, and as a continuous, unbroken chain. So the lecture that I'm going to give you came from 2 days of Jeffrey talking about Ge Heng, and we're going to condense that into 3 hours, so that'll be an interesting experiment. We have, actually there's a derivation of Tai Ching, Shang Qing, and Yu Qing, and this original one is from northern China. Then the branch comes, and this is associated with Lao Tzu. And then we have another branch, the Shang Qing, and then the Yu Qing comes later. And technically, Ge Heng was from the Shang Qing school, but his transmissions came from the Tai Ching school. So I feel as though I have gotten the information from an unbroken lineage, and it's pretty exciting to talk about, basically. So historically speaking, the Jin Dynasty, I want to give you an idea of what that is, right? 263 to 420. Common era. And Ge Heng, there are a lot of different accounts, but what I have is that he was 80 years old, 283 to 363. Common era. Some people have him as 81 because 81 is 9 times 9. 9 is the yang number representing the emperor. 9 times 9 is 81. 81 chapters of the Neijing, 81 chapters of the Nanjing. So this is a revered number. And so they, so in reverence to him, they give him 81 years. His autobiography, which I have to presume was written before he died, basically says that he lived to be 50 and then released his soul and became an immortal. So hard to say exactly what the story was. Anyway, the Tai Ching school is from northern China, and the Shang Qing and then the Yu Qing are from southern China. And part of what happens when a dynasty changes is that you then, perhaps you slay all the old members and then you burn the books, right? And then basically it's like history starts over again. At least that's the mentality as a new dynasty takes over. And if you know, in China, they actually start, the dates start at 0 again, or 1, I suppose, right? So if you go to China and they tell you what year it is, they translate the year that we use into their dynasty system. So it's an interesting scenario that way. So anyway, the thought is that since the invaders come from the north, that the north is sort of a vulnerable position. And the tradition that I'm looking at here, the Jade Purity tradition, which is basically classical Chinese medicine. The further you are in the south, so the Cantonese, the southern Chinese, and the Vietnamese, and Vietnam was part of China at least at this time. They were allowed to keep the books because the influence from the north wasn't as great, right? So they preserved the lineage. So this is why people that do secondary vessels are primarily Cantonese and Vietnamese people. Right? So that knowledge has been kept unbroken. And as you all know, the TCM version of Chinese medicine is basically a Sung Dynasty model that essentially glorifies herbology as internal medicine and then says acupuncture is sort of like physical therapy or massage. Right? And when you reduce the acupuncture system from 8 extraordinary vessels, 12 divergent meridians, 12 or 15 law collaterals, the sinew channels, the primary meridians. When you reduce that into 12 primary meridians and the du and the ren, you have effectively limited that. So it then does become a good adjunct to herbal therapy, but doesn't really become a modality that can handle chronic degenerative diseases and other serious things. So that's part of the background I want to talk about, that the reason we see people from southern China is because that lineage has been maintained. The Cantonese, though, dialect is a different dialect, and so you will see a lot of pinyin errors, or you will see, the Mandarin Chinese won't be translated quite as well. So we'll have a little confusion that way. But anyway, so we're going back into this time frame. If we remember the Han Dynasty, very famous dynasty, I'm going to go roughly 200 before Common Era. So it's something like 220 Common Era. We had some amazing people in that time. Hua Tuo is one of them, the surgeon that performed anesthesia, used anesthesia, performed amazing operations a long time ago. I mean, just miraculously. Zhang Zhongjing took a footnote from the Neijing and created the Shanghan Lun. Right, so we had some geniuses in this time. And Ge Heng's era is just a little bit later than that. So he's working on he's following the footsteps of some of these masters. Later we have the Tang Dynasty. And again, roughly 600 to 900 Common Era. And the Tang Dynasty poets revered Ge Heng because he spoke in metaphors, poetically. He was a Taoist, he understood Confucianism, but he thought the Confucian scholars were a little too full of themselves. That they were very rigid, moralistic, and he thought that the approach of being close to nature was a better approach. So he's famous for saying that Taoism is the root, and Confucianism is the branch. And so what that basically means is that if we live our life according to the Tao, if we live our life according to the principles of heaven as it comes down to earth, if we are conscious human beings, we'll have a good life, we will reach our destiny, we will lead the purposeful life that we have chosen, or that we've chosen to create. If we fall off the Tao, then the root has been poisoned or tarnished, and then we need to rein people in. So Taoism basically says, let's cultivate kidney yin. If I cultivate my inner nature, then I'll know what to do in any circumstance. Confucianism, on the other hand, cultivates kidney yang, which is to say, behaviors are important, and as we learn the proper behavior for each situation, then we'll know what to do, right? So it's a completely opposite approach. Each one has its validity, and Ge Heng is famous for writing, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is called the Bao Puzi. His classic was the writings of simplicity, embracing simplicity, right? And it has two books, and the first book is about Taoism and making these transformational changes. And the second book is about Confucianism and what do we do when people don't live according to the Tao? And how do we reform the government, and how do we reform society? So he really did balance both aspects. So I think he's a particularly interesting person, and a fairly colorful person too. So far so good? We're all on the same page? All right, so Ge Heng's father, Ge Ti, was the governor of what is now Shaanxi in southern China, in Hunan province, basically. So he was well-to-do. Ge Heng came from a well-to-do family. Right? So the Jin dynasty originally was ruled from the south. When it was ruled from the north, his father lost prestige. Right? So there was a change in the, I don't know if it's the later Jin or early Jin dynasty or Eastern and Western, I forget the distinction, but there were two Jin dynasties here. And basically, when his father lost power and prestige, the family's background, the family status went down. Gehung's father died when Gehung was 12 years old, and his autobiography talks about the hardship that he endured, cold and hunger and laboring on chopping wood, being a farmer. This is undoubtedly true, but I think this is modeled after other people and sort of glorified in a way that the Taoist hero overcomes the early hardship kind of thing. So he came from a well-to-do family. He was clearly well-educated, but at 12 his father died. So he's chopping wood, and his father's extensive library was destroyed by rebel soldiers. So, that was a source of much information and classical things here. At age 14, he studied with a master called Zheng Yin, one of 50 students of Zheng Yin, a classical scholar who started with Taoism and the arts of longevity, divination, astrology, etc. But then also did study Confucianism as well. And Zheng Yin actually studied with Gehung's uncle, Ge Xuan. And this Xuan is the mystery Xuan here, right? So this is a Taoist adept this is Gehung's uncle, who was supposed to have attained immortality in Gehung's lifetime. So this isn't something that is a theoretical concept. This is something that Gehung grew up with. Right? So this isn't an esoteric belief with no basis in reality. So he first studied the Confucian classics as well as the Taoist arts. And Gehung was exposed to something called the Jin Dan. And Dan we know as the Dan Tien, or sometimes called the elixir field, and Jin is the golden, means gold. So the golden ball, the golden field. And you create that within your body. And then you transform from that. And this was Gehung's main focus. He was also very well trained in the martial arts and military strategy in general. But from Zheng Yin, he received some alchemical scriptures, mostly from the Tai Ching school, from Lao Tzu. And so he got some classical training directly from his main teacher. And there were 50 students that he was involved with. But he was the prize student of the 50 students. And he got the most goodies from his master, basically. At age 20, he had to perform military service. So a friend of his was the governor-elect of Guangzhou, or Canton. And he was chosen to be the bodyguard of this governor-elect. And as they traveled to Guangzhou, they were attacked. His friend was killed en route, and thus a temporary end to Gehung's military service. But he was a very skilled martial artist, so I want you to understand that part of his being as well. Later in his 30s, he was again recruited to do some military service and was a brilliant statistician. He actually helped defeat rebel forces. So after he went to Guangzhou, he lived for 8 years there as a recluse in a famous mountain called Laofu, or Laofushan. When he returned back to where he was born, he studied with another Taoist adept called Bao Qing. Bao Qing was so impressed with Gehung, again, a very charismatic man. The martial art training gives you a certain stance, a certain stature. And he offered his eldest daughter to Gehung in marriage. So a nice prize. So I mentioned the Bao Puzi, the master who embraces simplicity. And the inner chapters are about Taoism and attaining longevity and even immortality. The outer chapters are basically Confucian issues dealing with social problems of the time. And how do we reform people's behavior from the outside with incentives and penalties. There's a classic that came down to Bao Gaoheng, Shen Xian Zhuan. This means Shen, for spirit, Xian for the immortals, and the compilation of the biographies of a number of immortals. So this text is attributed to Gaoheng. Either wrote or else he compiled this text. In the same tradition that Sun Simiao compiled the ghost points. Sun Simiao didn't create the ghost points. He traveled around the country and collected some 20-odd ghost points and distilled them down to 13 that we know today. So Sun Simiao is also of the Jade Purity school, and but he was later in the Tang Dynasty. One of the immortals in this particular book was Gaoheng's uncle, or granduncle, Ge Xuan, this guy. And it's said that as an immortal, Ge Xuan transmitted these teachings to Gaoheng. So one was the Tai Ching Jing, or the purity, the classic about the greater purity. Another was the Jin Ya Jing, or the scripture of the golden elixir, which we're talking about here, the golden elixir. And another one is called the Ling Bao scriptures, again, which is supposed to be coming directly from the deities. Ling Bao, Ling for spirit or soul. I've already mentioned in the Bao Puzi, we have the inner chapters and the outer chapters, and this notion of the cultivation of self is the root of Taoism. That if I work on my inner nature, I can then respond to whatever happens outside. If I become my true self. So the highest attainment in this from Taoism is called the Zhenren, right? The true person. And this involves a lot of cultivation. It involves becoming more of a hermit for a while. But then Gaoheng believed that we need society to sort of measure our progress. That anyone can be spiritual in the temple, but can you be spiritual in the marketplace? Right? That's one of the lessons that is also true of Buddhism. And in terms of Confucianism, we call it the Junzi. Many of you know the Si Junzi Tang coming from something like that, right? The same idea. So the Zhenren is the true person, and the Junzi is essentially the sage. Boils down to that. So the sage has been trained in all forms of etiquette. The sage knows how to talk to people who are of a higher rank, of the same rank, and a lower rank, right? Because Confucianism is very involved in social order. What's the proper way to talk to your parents? What's the proper way to talk to your siblings? What's the proper way to talk to your younger siblings? So age is a very important aspect. But the whole focus is yin and yang on your behaviors. If you train your behavior, then you know what to do in situations, right? And again, the opposite idea is that if I look within myself, cultivate myself, allow my true nature to come out, I will deal appropriately with every situation. So different perspectives, hopefully coming to the same conclusion. All right, so I guess we're coming to the idea where we go into the 9 transformations now. This is the part of the issue about talking of Chinese medicine, and part of why TCM chose to create something that appeared to be more scientific. Right? So we know that illness comes from xia qi. Right? Xia qi literally is evil qi. So if you're in the 1950s and you're trying to sell Chinese medicine to the West, it sounds a little superstitious, and when you talk about immortals and ghosts and the like, But this is the culture that, I mean, these things are real in China. There's no question that they're real in China. So what did the TCM people come up with? Pathogenic factors. It sounds scientific, doesn't it? Right? Pathogenic factors, right? So Ted Kapchick in the Web That Has No Weaver wanted to get something in between, so he calls them pernicious influences. It's not good and evil. It's just sort of, impish or mischievous or something like that, right? How do we present TCM in a way that doesn't seem superstitious, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of us feel that TCM sort of threw out the baby with the bathwater here. That most of us like the spiritual quality of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. But for instance, what did they, the point Shen Men in the ear now, they're translating that as neurogate. Neurogate, instead of the gate of the Shen or the spirit, right? Because that sounds something the West could buy, This is a fine line to walk. How do we appear to be legitimate to the Western community, but then how do we also embrace the roots of Chinese medicine that essentially have a spiritual background? Because science and spirituality are not mutually exclusive necessarily, right? I think we can form I think a spiritual science will eventually come out, and not just a 21 grams idea that, you died and you're 21 grams lighter now, therefore the soul was 21 grams, something like that, which is interesting that you can actually categorically measure something like that. So how do we balance this aspect? I think we all have to be Genren. I think we all have to be true to ourselves. And I can tell you as a practitioner early on, having graduated, that you start out with wanting to have this really broad spectrum. I want to appeal to a lot of people. I want to be able to help a lot of people. And I found personally that after a while, I only want to work on so many musculoskeletal problems. I only want to work on so many, wind cold, wind heat, various types of things. After a while, I want to work on things that are a little deeper. I want to work on stress. I want to work on emotional disorders. I want to work on constitutional problems. And in so doing, I developed my own style. And my own style included things that I learned from Jeffrey. I'm not an herbalist. I'm an acupuncturist. But what came to me from the materia medica were things like essential oils and stone medicine. So I do use crystals, I use lapis, I use jade, I use various stones, because the stones are said to have bling. Plants and animals are said to have shen. And there's a distinction here that shen is our connection to all that is. So plants can help everyone, basically for any condition, right? But stones only have their own life cycle. It's a geological life cycle, right? So, but how do you form stones? Through heat and pressure. So how do they help us? We can deal with heat and pressure, the conflict in our lives. Yin, fire. Emotional conflicts that we feel pressured in our lives, right? So I like to use oils and stones essentially on acupuncture points, or from a Wei Qi perspective of breathing them in, or just having them in your environment. That affects your mood. So it changes your perspective, it changes your consciousness. Needless to say, this is actually part of classical Chinese medicine, stones and oils, but not part of TCM now. And again, that's the choice of trying to be more appealing to Western medicine and Western culture. So it's a dance. It's a dance. So I believe that these the notions of immortality. Who are these immortals? Right? And we could easily say that they are extraterrestrials. right? But that gets us even further away from the Western acceptability here, right? But when you deal with metaphysics, you have to be careful who you're talking to and what you're saying, right? And the notion of don't cast your pearls before swine is a good notion, okay? And not to be too judgmental about that, but you don't say in an audience that doubts you, you don't reveal certain things, because then that doubt resonates back to you, right? So you put it away and you talk about pathogenic factors. You don't talk about evil chi. So I can't tell you what these immortals looked like, but I do think that either there's a transmission, a psychic transmission, or else there is actually an image of that person forms in front of you and then has a dialogue, or actually seems like a real person. So I can think there are various levels. We have the burning bush from Christianity. We have various things of these sort of visions. Are these people crazy? Are they hallucinating? Are they having a religious experience? How do you know? How do you know? And the same thing, I'm just going to talk about ghosts for a second. The Chinese believe it is a moot point. Is this an external demon? Is this an internal demon? You're being haunted either way, right? So is this your imagination? Is this something that can be measured through, paranormal devices that establishes, oh, we all feel this cold entity and we feel this, evil energy? They don't care. The Chinese don't care. You're haunted either way. So we use ghost points for psychological issues as well as for exorcisms. We have 9 transformational strategies, similar to the idea that we have 9 heart channel points and 9 pericardium channel points. Again, the idea that 9 is this yang and revered number. We also have the 9 palaces. So we can call that from feng shui, we can call that from face reading. So 9 is significant here. The first one is called Dan Hua. So again, Dan, the character Dan, comes from this idea of a well that is then kind of drying up. And inside the well, as it evaporates, the minerals in there become more and more concentrated, right? So Dan, and then Dan Tian. Tian is a rice paddy, right? So we're saying there is a field of concentrated energy. So this is sometimes called the cinnabar field, the golden elixir. They have a lot of names for it, but literally it means an area that then the energy of that area is concentrated into a small space. So for instance, we can say I have an upper Dantian, but that focal point may be Yin Tang here. I have a middle Dantian, but that focal point is Ren 17. I have a lower Dantian, that focal point is Ren 6, Ren 4, whatever you like for that. All right, so we have this idea of some kind of elixir here. And I want to point out that Ge Heng felt that the original heart channel was the pericardium channel. Okay, so remember we had the idea Wu Zhang Liu Fu. The 5 yin organs and the 6 yang organs. Right? And that just didn't sit well. They needed 12. They needed to balance it out. So originally, the heart channel was the pericardium channel, and the source point was pericardium 7. And the notion that the pericardium channel, the heart, should be in the middle because it's central to our lives, right? So it kind of made sense that it flowed down the middle. And then they had this issue of people had heart attacks, chest pains and heart attacks, and they felt it radiate down to the little finger of the left hand. So then they said, okay, we better adapt to that, and we'll create the heart channel. But the heart channel that we think of as the heart channel really isn't the classical heart channel. It's really just later evolved to then deal with chest pain and heart attacks, basically. But in any event, we have 9 points of each. And Gehung's mentality is that if we go from pericardium 1 to pericardium 9, that we can get messages from the images, from the metaphors of these points. And it's as though the pericardium channel is a guide for you to proceed through various stages of your life. And by palpating that channel, as you can work backwards, you can palpate to see what stage you are, or you can see where am I in terms of my spiritual evolution, and then, okay, what point would correspond with that situation? Right? So we have, in a sense, we have sort of the guru or the guide as the pericardium channel. And then if you go through 1 through 9 and you're not then, well, then you can go to the second guru, right? You can be a spiritual interloper and move to the heart channel. And then the lessons of the heart channel will then reinforce the pericardium channel's lessons, right? So if we have time at the end, I'll go through that. So the Danhua, this is the Hua is flourishing. Hua is a flower, but Hua also means transformation. Okay, so the first step is to open the sensory portals. So we have to open our consciousness, similar to the Jingwell points that open the chest. So we need to open the chest and to then open the sensory portals. And he believes that you have to be in touch with the source of our feelings, and he calls that transformative yang. It's also called alchemical fire. So the points. Kidney 21, kidney 19, stomach 19, let's see, kidney 23, and Ren 14. All right, so let's look and see what does this tell us here. Kidney 21, Yo Mun, the hidden gate. Some of you know that kidney 11 through kidney 21 are the points that are half-sun lateral to the Ren channel. They happen to be the points on the kidney lateral. They're also the points on the Chongmai. So probably more important, kidney 11 through kidney 21, Chongmai points that deal with kidney and heart issues, and they also deal with kidney and spleen issues. So heart and kidney not communicating, which is essentially the basic lesson in life. Heart Shen and kidney Jing. The other aspect would be kidney, let's say kidney Yang supporting spleen Qi. So that's a digestive aspect. This is, in a sense, how do I go from being individually minded, spontaneous, to dealing with society? That would be one aspect of this. But perhaps the more crucial aspect is my heart Shen and kidney Jing. Kidney Jing is essentially talking about your body and your physicality, and how does my Jing unfold? What is the maturation process like? So this is more about the body. And heart Shen is more about, I'm going to use the word karma here, but I believe curriculum is perhaps a better notion here. That curriculum is, karma, we always say good karma and bad karma. We don't say good curriculum and bad curriculum, you know? So this idea, what are my life lessons, and what is the vehicle that I have to go through the journey of life? And when we talk about heart and kidney not communicating, you usually talk about anxiety, heat above, and then cold below. So the anxiety makes my head go everywhere, right? We know fire scatters, right? So I have agitation and anxiety, but cold shrinks, right? So I have the paralysis, and it's kind of like a panic attack, right? Where I want to escape, and I can't move, right? That would be a good example of heart and kidney not communicating. And that's pretty much where TCM stops, but classical Chinese medicine says, who's not communicating with who? Who's resistant here, right? If I don't like my body, then my heart Shen is not accepting the body. My heart Shen is rejecting the Jing here. If I want to have plastic surgery, if I want to be someone else, then my heart is not accepting my kidney Jing. If I'm okay with my body, but I don't like my life's lessons, I'd rather have your life. I don't want my life, right? Your life sounds easier. I have all these problems, right? That idea, that would be your kidney is not accepting your Shen, your heart Shen. Your kidney is not relating to that. So what I'm suggesting here is that this line on the Chongmai is very significant. So we start at kidney 21, we go down to kidney 19, up to stomach 19, kidney 23, and then Ren 14. So we start at the hidden gate. Yomun is the hidden gate. So the Tao is somewhat mysterious, right? We never see the Tao, we only see the manifestations of the Tao. The 10,000 things are the manifestation of the Tao. But the Tao is the underlying principle. So we never actually see the Tao. Right? So we start at the hidden gate. Okay, and then we go to kidney 19 is the yin metropolis. So from the hidden gate, we're going to the yin metropolis, which implies form. Right? So we have something coming from the Tao, coming from the mysterious level. It puts itself in form. Stomach 19, Bu Rong, not contained. Okay. What is not being contained in the Ren, or I'm sorry, in the Yin, or what is forming like obstacles that we have to deal with? Kidney 23, Shen Feng, spirit seal. So we're going from mystery to form, looking at what are the obstacles we have in form, going to spirit, and then coming back to Ren 14, the heart and Mu point, right? The great gateway. And what is the gateway to? It's the gateway to your heart, to yourself, to your emperor, to the decision maker. So we create this pattern, and then we repeat it on the other side. Kidney 21, so we're always ending up in the center, in the heart here. The heart Mu point. The gathering point for source energy in the heart, or for Jing, for that matter. So we start to see this pattern of life, from the mystery to the form, being born. What obstacles do we create in the form that we have taken on? How do we relate to the spiritual side that brings us to the great gateway into the heart? And the heart is ruling our decisions, right? The heart is the possibility for happiness, for joy. That's the measure of our life. Are we successful in our life? So you're doing this on one side and then the other side. Start with left for males, right for females, and then vice versa. You put them in this order, you take them out of this order. Taoists are big on ritual. Right. So any questions about that? What does it look like? No, well, good.
I'm just going to keep them coming.
Go, please.
Have you ever tried it going out of order? And if you have, what happens?
The question is, have you ever tried it out of order? And if you do, what happens? You have some Billy Idol rebel cheese here, don't you? I don't think. I think your intention is what's important,
Yes.
right? And so I don't think you would intend to do it out of order. I think you would intend to do it with some strategy. But if you inadvertently did the wrong side first, as long as your intention is that I'm trying to help someone go through the process of life and go through the discovery of the self through the spirit, I think that's the most important thing. But I do think if you follow the roadmap more precisely, you get there quicker.
Well, as soon as I asked the question, what came up for me was, what's your intention?
Yeah.
So that sealed the deal.
I think we're on the right track then,
Okay.
yeah. Yes?
Thank
Do you verbalize the procedure with the patient? Or do you
I do.
just-
Yeah, yeah. But I don't just do that for this, I do that all the time. Whatever I do for a patient, I try to explain on whatever terms I can. The patients that are with you long term, you can sort of fill in more stuff. But I will at least say to someone, I'm connecting these points to release something, and this is the drain, and that's where the problem is, something like that. I always express my intention. And if visualization is helpful for the person, I usually tell them to visualize maybe draining things from the top down if they're stressed out, for instance, whatever. So I always do that.
David, how do you determine the needle retention time? Is it through a fixed timetable, or you check the pulse, or intuitively?
My notion is that if I do sinew channel treatments, they're probably more in the 15-minute range, and I'll certainly check on someone. I try to check midway and then about when I think it's done. Primary meridians somewhere 15 to 25 minutes. Divergent meridians more like 30 minutes, and 8 extraordinary vessels 30 to 40 minutes, right? But ultimately what I do is come in, re-stimulate the needles, and then say, how do you feel? When a person says, I'm getting agitated or I feel like I want to get up, by all means I let them up, right? But I keep asking them, and if they want to stay longer, that's fine. Also understand that I use very thin needles. I'm using basically 38 gauge needles most of the time, right? So my training from Chinese medicine was to use 32 gauge needles, 34 gauge needles to get qi to be a strong qi sensation. Then when I studied Japanese acupuncture, they looked at me like I was a barbarian. Like how do you bruise and abuse your patients like this? So then I used 36 and 38 gauge needles. But I think the more needle you have, the thicker the needle, the easier it is to get qi, but also the more painful it is to insert it. So you have to sort of weigh that. And I think over time, you can, at least for me, I can use finer needles. But there are some people that just need a good thick needle, right? They just need that to get that qi moving, right? In my opinion, the true Chinese technique, where I stop when I get the qi, when I do Li4 and I feel that come up, and the hand doesn't actually do that, but energetically it feels like that's what's happening. It's like, the meridian comes up to meet the needle. I stop there, but I know people that, all right, can you feel it in your elbow now? All right, can you feel it in your shoulder now? But of course the patient's screaming during this, right? But there's a sort of a no pain, no gain to the hardcore Chinese, And remember the word swan is how they describe the qi. So swan means sore from a physical perspective, but sour from a taste perspective. And when you look at the face of someone who was getting that done, they look sore and sour. They're like, there's like a. And I want to contrast that with more the Japanese style, where you do a lot of palpation, you activate the wei qi, so that they do what I call the floppy needle technique, or at least some do, right, where the needle is just sort of in, and it can be even, sort of moving around. It's not necessarily well embedded in there. But that mentality is, I've aroused the qi already. It's already moving, and the needle is just sort of a focal point to continue that process. So there's a lot of different techniques here. I kind of went with the one that for me felt right for this culture. Right? I mean, Americans, if you give them a lot of pain, they're not coming back. Right? I mean, that's my experience with Americans. The no pain, no gain, they might do that in sports, they don't do that in acupuncture. But again, your intention, remember the superior physician, I believe it's in the Sue one, the superior physician, the number one aspect is intention. Number two is cultivation. Right. Number three would be the knowledge of herbology. Number four is the knowledge of acupuncture. And number five is the ability to diagnose. Right. In Western medicine, you would say the ability to diagnose is the first most important thing. Right? So intention, cultivation, then knowledge of your disciplines, herbology and acupuncture. And the acupuncturists are unhappy that herbology came first. Right? They're not, or they're still, after over 2,000 years, still annoyed by that. But you know, let's give that up, right? And then the ability to diagnose, that's the last one. All right, so the next step is essentially talismans. So once we enter the realm of spirit, and we're sort of leaving the convention of the social norm and the protection of ignorance. Right? When you open Pandora's box, now we need some protection. So the second one is called Shen Fu. And this is the idea of talismans. So we have our landmarks, the clavicle and the sternum. Okay, so these are the three talismans. And we have the points Ren 22 and stomach 12. Stomach 12, Trepan, the broken basin. Implies, so that's the idea that above your clavicle you feel that, and it feels like half of a bowl or a basin, right? Now we know that this is where the internal pathways of the primary meridians connect to the Zangfu organs, right? So this implies going deep. Ren 22, I think it's the celestial chimney. Tian 2, I believe.
Correct.
Is that right? So this implies, this is how we go from this area up to the head and up to heaven, right, through the crown chakra, right? So this is how we get, how we connect to spirit or Shen. So, and we also talk about these three things as perhaps the Tai Ching, the Shang Ching, and the Yu Ching, right? The three purities. And I know I've mentioned that there are schools of that, but I haven't really talked about what they do, and I will shortly. Right? All right, so we have this Shen Fu. We're doing this bilaterally. Again, the notion that males, you start on the left side and right for females, but you start with Ren 22, and then left for the male, and then right, or right for the female, and then left. Okay, so that's the idea. And this notion that we are inviting these three entities, the Tai Ching, the Shang Ching, and the Yu Ching. We're inviting them into our lives to protect ourselves. So I really, at this point, I should tell you, what does that mean, right? So if we look at the human body, our inner core, we can say that that's Jing, or essence, right? And this would be the bones, the constitutional part, right? And then we have an interior aspect. Let's call that Qi. And then a more superficial aspect. And call that Shen. It's perhaps better for me to translate this into the different types of Qi. And let's call this source Qi, Yuan Qi. Let's call this Ying Qi, or the Qi of blood and emotions. And let's call this Wei Qi, that which deals in the superficial aspect of the skin, the flesh, the connective tissues, the muscles, right? So this is our outermost self. This is the, we'll call this the surface, we'll call this the interior, and we'll call this the constitution. We then have these three, they call this the three hun. And these are these three kind of spirit guides, if you will. And they surround the body in the same fashion. But in reverse order. So we call the first one, it's green, right? The Tai Ching. We call the second one the Shang Ching. And the third one is the Yu Ching. And what does this mean here? In terms of accessing information, when the comment was made that Jeffrey channels things, right? We can say that the realm of the Tai Ching is the closest to the physical body. And this is the realm of ghosts, of things that have left the physical form but haven't left the earthbound plane. Right? And if we're looking at some kind of aspect of this, we would call that lung paw, or the spirit of the body. Right? So the spirit of the body hasn't returned to the earth, it's still lingering around. And we have access to these types of spirits. Right? This could be an ancestor coming to talk to you, something like that. And maybe this is how some of the immortals talk, although they have more control of this process. The Shang Ching we talk about as relating to liver hun. And liver hun is the ethereal soul as opposed to the corporeal soul of the body. This is the ethereal soul, and this is the soul that has the collective consciousness of your past lives. Right? So now, if I have the ability to access this Shang Ching level, I can look and say, what is the path of my soul? What are the last few incarnations like? Why did I come in this incarnation? What is the purpose? What is the unfinished business that I need to fulfill so that I don't have to keep coming back here, or I can move on to another dimension? Or I can choose to come back and help other people, but I've transcended my own curriculum or karma. So we could call that the astral plane, if you like. Maybe this would be the auric plane, the astral plane. And then this jade purity part, this would be, I would say heart shen, but we talk about the big shen versus the heart shen. And the heart shen is your individual connection to spirit and all there is. But now we're talking about, I'm going to emphasize it this way, big shen. For lack of a better term, this is the spiritual realm. This is everything that ever was, everything that ever will be. Short form, all that is. All that is. Right? So you picture a veil of Maya, you picture the spirit realm, well, let's call this metaphysics, and the physical realm, right? Form. And everything is coming through that veil of Maya into the form. So this is the creational aspect. Right? So you can imagine, I mean, first of all, how incredible is it? So I would say psychics probably have access to the first one, the Tai Ching, right? But the more evolved you get, to access your lessons of the soul and to access the lessons of existence, requires tremendous cultivation. Right? So this comes back to this idea. This is the beginning of connecting to Shang Ching, Tai Ching, Shang Ching, and Yu Ching, right? The jade purity, and if you like, we can call, this one is jade, this one is cinnabar, if that's easier to visualize, and this one is quartz. So they're associated with these different minerals. We know clear quartz, for instance, has all the light in it, right? Clear quartz has the vibration of all the colors of the rainbow. Cinnabar, we know, has some toxic material in it, but if you can refine your digestive fire, your earth fire, you can purify that and take it. But obviously many people die doing this kind of physical alchemy. So Goheng experimented with both. He did physical alchemy, but he returned to what we call inner alchemy. Right? And then jade represents eternity, represents your soul. And you know how the Chinese are about jade, right? You wear a jade bracelet, right? And if you fall down, what happens? The jade bracelet breaks, but you're safe, right? So the idea that jade protects you, and jade is eternal, right? So we all wear jade and we all fall down, right? That's the strategy, right? But in terms of the mineral kingdom, we look at gold as the incorruptible metal, that all metals are evolving towards gold under the right conditions. Now, I'm not saying if you have a piece of silver on your wrist, it's not going to turn to gold, but in the earth, under the right conditions, it could evolve into gold. And the same thing is true of stones, that all stones under the right conditions are evolving into jade. So this jade is the highest form of the stones. Okay, so we established this talisman of stomach 12, Ren 22, and these are all generally done down, pointed down. Right? And so we're bringing the protection of the Shen down into the body. So that's step number 2. So what's keeping us safe? Our Shen. This reminds me of going to see the Karmapa, who was a Tibetan Buddhist incarnation, a lama, a tulku actually, who he's the one that when the Dalai Lama dies, he predicts where to find the next Dalai Lama. And he does this for other incarnations as well. But I was fortunate to go to 2 of what they call the black crown ceremony, the black hat ceremony, where they perform a ceremony. He becomes the consciousness of Avalokiteshvara, who is also Guanyin, who is also Kannon, who is also Chenrezig. So he has a lot of names, but this is the Buddha. And when you go to this ceremony, they give you this little piece of yarn, and they say, "This is the cord of protection." And you go, "Oh, wow, I have the cord of protection." And they tell you it protects you from your own mind. Because that's the most dangerous thing you're going to run into, right? And the same thing here, that our spirit is protecting us, but the most horrible things are the things that we can imagine, right? And so, anyway, this is the idea that we have to have the sense of feeling safe. So the saying is that this prepares us to ride the dragon, right? And that means to ascend in our evolutionary process to meet our destiny, or our Ming. I think most of you heard that term Ming, which we translate as destiny. But it starts with these 3 lines, and these 3 lines are often seen as heaven, earth, and humanity. Right, the 3 main forces. And then, oops, I think we have the door first, right? Where's Christine? Is she still here?
Yeah, the door.
Have I got that right? Yeah.
No,
it's the other way around?
No, it's the other way around.
Yeah, thank you. Like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have the 3 forces, heaven, earth, and humanity. Then we have the body. And how do these 3 forces enter into the body? This is a mouth, but that mouth is generally translated into an opening or an entryway. Right? So how do the forces of heaven, earth, and humanity, how do they enter into the body? That's Ming. That's your destiny. So something is programmed within you, but of course you have free will. Your heart is the emperor. Your heart decides. I have the choice of accepting my destiny, of pursuing my destiny. I have the choice of rejecting my destiny. Right? I have free will that way. I can pursue things by cultivation of kidney yin or kidney yang, however you want to do that. Or I can dampen the spirit and say, that potential is a little too frightening. I don't want to go that direction. Let me go the damp route. Right? What's the damp route? Sugar's a good start. Right? If your destiny in Shen is fire, then what puts out the fire is dampness. Yeah. Dampness, right? So sweet, sugar, sweet, cold, dairy, ice cream. Right? Yeah. Now, the other things we can do, recreational drugs, alcohol, tobacco, there are lots of things you can do to dampen yourself. But most of us, sugar and love early on, you're a good boy, have a treat, right? And we were rewarded for that.
Bio break, 10 minutes.
Take a break now?
10 minutes.
In 10 minutes or now?
I think whatever you feel.
All right, this is a good time to take a break. So 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's have a real 10-minute break. So because he's got quite a bit of material. Let's reconvene right at 11:30, right on the dot. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I saw the Dalai Lama in October at Emory in Georgia. And you know one of the things he kept saying over and over again is that science has got to get spirit. And that's exactly what you just said. And so hopefully it's going that way.
In general, if what I say aligns with the Dalai Lama, I'm very happy.
Well said.
It made me think of, I was fortunate to see the last Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa. And when he died, there was a controversy as to who the next Karmapa was. And I remember looking in the New York Times, there was an article on this, and there were two photos of the two people that were questioned, who were suspected to be the next Karmapa. And I looked at the two pictures, and I instantly related to one of them and said, well, this is it. That's him. And I thought, how can you know that if it was the old body and this is a new body? What could you possibly see? How could you know that? But I just had that feeling, and as I read down, it was like, okay, and this one was Karmapa's uncle said, this is Karmapa. And then the Dalai Lama said, this was Karmapa. And I went, I'm with the Dalai Lama. I'm feeling good. Yeah. Okay, so the third step now, Shen Dan. So this is also called San Cai, the three treasures. So the previous step that involved the stomach 12 and Ren 22 had opened the chest up, right? Now we want to connect the chest with the three Dantian, the upper Dantian, the middle Dantian, and the lower Dantian. So pericardium 1, the celestial pool, or heaven's pool, this idea that heaven's rain, so P1, heaven's rain comes down to earth. And then that sort of pools and collects. So the spirit of heaven comes down and forms a pool or a way to collect that energy so that the earth can respond to that, so we can respond to that. So heaven's energy rains down upon us, and we collect that. You can say that some of it falls from the broken basin here, down into the pelvic bowl, into the pelvic cavity. So that pelvic bowl is going to collect things, right? So both pericardium 1 and stomach 12 are draining down into the pelvic bowl. The people that are concerned about pericardium 1 as being on the breast and just lateral to the nipple, you can go down to liver 14 if that's an issue here. And liver 14, the chapter gate Chi-mun, this actually gives us the sense of time, that we are dealing with cycles, because this is the last point on the last channel. It then goes to lung 1, the first point in the first channel. So this is how we sort of reestablish the time element, the circadian rhythms, if you want to do that for sleep cycles, if you want to do that for the menstrual cycle, any circadian rhythm or any kind of rhythm that is out of balance, we can do the last point on the last channel, the first point on the first channel to help establish that. In this case, we're actually doing it to transcend time. Right, so we want to, as we prepared, as we bring in those three spirits, the Shangqing, the Tai Ching, Shangqing, and Yu Qing, right? These different energy fields around us, these guides, we bring that in. And at this point, it's okay to now transcend time. So if we want to emphasize that time element, we do liver 14. Okay. Then we do spleen 15 to bring this down to the lower dantian. So spleen 15, the great horizon, right at the level of the navel, and that's going to bring it to the lower dantian. And then we do 20 to circulate it to the upper dantian. So we've brought this spirit from heaven that has come down from the celestial pool of pericardium 1 into the broken basin, and then down into the pelvic region, help it go to the pelvic region, and then back up to the top. So we've circulated this energy. This is part of our next transformation. Okay, and up to the brain, up to the brain. And when I said transcend time, I mean to stay in the present moment. Right? Because we know 220 at the vertex, and some of you find it directly where the ears, top of the ears, and other people find it a little further back. I think the more Taoist tradition is to find it further back here. But in any event, what we know is that actually liver 14, right? Liver 14, that's our last liver channel point, right? But we know the liver channel goes to the genitalia and also goes to the brain, the two curious organs, or two of the curious organs, right? And going to the brain here, we know that the blood stores the qi. The qi is the experience. So the emotions or the shen in the blood are stored, right? And the idea of memory, the ability to recall things in the past, is a function of the liver. Right? So we bring this back up to 20, and the emphasis is stay in the present moment. Don't worry about the past, don't worry about the future.
David?
Yes.
Can you further explain the two locations of 20 for both the practitioner and the students?
Right. So I believe TCM was going to tell you, if you sort of fold your ears, right, to feel the top and then release it, coming directly above that is 20. And I think we all start with that one. But if you go a little further back, feel where that fontanelle is. So this might be considered, June 19. I know that Mikio Sankey uses this point instead of 20. So this is
a swirl.
Right, where the swirl of your hair is, or that fontanelle aspect. Another way of looking at this is if you were to look at Ren 23, so you feel the hyoid bone, a little hard to talk and feel the hyoid bone, but the upper border of the hyoid bone, and you angle how you might want to needle that should, is that a line?
Yeah.
I can't tell, but that's the notion that Ren 23 and Do 20 should connect if you're coming.
Good.
They should meet in the middle. Okay.
For the exam sake, it's the TCN.
Right.
For the practice sake is the one that he just described.
Right. So obviously, you jump through the hoops to get your license, right? And then you experientially work through, see what works for you. But for me, so I could call it Do 19, but it has the energy of Do 20 for me. So that's where I find it. To forget the past, to stay in the present, is to reconstitute the primordial chi. So we are returning to source, returning to all that is. All right, so that's the third transformation. The fourth transformation is Huandan, and Huan means to circulate. You might know gallbladder 30 is the leaping circle, the jumping circle, Huantiao. It's that same word. And what are we circulating? We're circulating Jing. Right? Goheng says we should do the Qigong exercise, essentially the microcosmic orbit. Right? So we're bringing the Qi up, but he especially wants to push the energy from Du 4 Mingmen to Du 14 at the neck, right? So the impulse or the reflex that controls the legs, the reflex that controls the head, up to Du 20, right? So we've activated the yang. Then in a sitting position, gallbladder 1, Tung Zi Liao, it means pupil, but it also has something that is pure. And the notion with gallbladder 1 is that we have the choice to see things in a different way. Remember, gallbladder is Xiao Yang, lesser yang. So first we have to have Tai Yang. And Tai Yang is essentially vertical, right? Yang is vertical, yin is basically horizontal, right? The earth is yin, heaven is yang, the sun is yang. So Tai Yang, in such of the urinary bladder, let's look at the legs now. Once I am vertical, once I have a line, Do 4, Do 14, and Do 20, I am in the yang state, right? I'm participating, I am active, I am in the yang engaged mode. Xiao Yang basically says, now that I'm up, what am I going to do, right? Xiao Yang, we know, has a pivotal energy. I can go left, I can go right. I can go forward, I can go back. I can speed up, I can slow down. I can go into the Yang Ming, which is the doorway into the yin. So I could, in this position, I can speed up, I can go faster, or I can sort of collapse my energy. If I'm not going anywhere, I can put my head down, I can collapse my chest, I can bend my knees, I can return to the fetal position, right? I can go back to that sense of wholeness. Right? So what this is saying, the Xiao Yang of gallbladder 1 is saying, I have the choice now to look at things differently. I have the choice to look with a sense of innocence. All right? So again, I'm sitting for this, and these are done in that vertical. After you've aroused the yang with the Qigong practice, you're sitting and you're doing these points. Sanjiao 17 is the wind screen. So we had this point, gallbladder 1, towards the outer canthus here, right? And now we have the point behind the ear, towards the earlobe, between the bones here, between the mastoid process and the mandible. Yifeng, wind screen. So this implies that we have a screen here to protect us from the intensity of the wind here. But the wind is change. How do we respond to the wind? What is our ability? What is our flexibility? Our ability to deal with change. In Goheng's time, we know fear as an aspect of the kidney, but fear of change in Goheng's time was a gallbladder deficiency. So if you are not willing, if you're afraid of changes in your life, and the Tao Te Ching tells us that the only thing constant is change, right? So these are mechanisms to loosen us up. Both Sanjiao and gallbladder are Xiao Yang, right? These are imply flexibility of the arms, flexibility of the legs, flexibility in general of our constitution. Right? UB11 is the influential point for bone. So now we're saying, I'm looking at things differently. I have a sense of protection, and I have a sense of flexibility dealing with change, and I'm going to bring that into the constitution. I'm going to bring that into my essence, right? Into the bone level. Okay. you do this, you take the needles out, and then lying face down, gallbladder 31 and UB 30. Okay, gallbladder 31, feng chur the wind market. When you're standing where your middle finger rests, along that iliotibial band, pericardium 9, jung chung, the central aspect of the chongmai. The chongmai is the penetrating vessel. The chongmai is the blueprint of your existence. The chongmai determines how your jing unfolds. Right? So where that lands, this is a point that gives us a certain willingness to change. Again, so it plays on the flexibility of Sanjiao 17 here. So I'm willing to change, and now in the legs of my movements, I'm willing to take steps to change. So our language talks to us. The hands handle things, we grasp things, we hold on to things to understand them, right? But the steps that we take to make the changes are in our legs, right? So we have this ability, this willingness to change. UB30, Bai Huan Shu, white ring transporting. In this case, we're talking, now notice where this is, right? This is, if you look at the sacrum, and then the Baliao points, the 4 holes, you're just outside the sacrum, oops, I'm sorry, S4, UB30. So this is, in the holes, you've got 31, 32, 33, 34. But we also have outside, let's go backwards, 30, 29, 28, 27, okay? So UB30 is at the 4th sacral foramen, level with the 4th sacral foramen, but outside the sacrum. What we're doing now is circulating Jing up the spine, right? Up the Du channel. And then you can also bring it back down the Ren channel. Or you can picture in between in the Chongmai. Remember that the Baliao points, the 8 seams points, that these little foramen here are seen anatomically as a hole for a nerve or a blood vessel to go through. But in the Taoist tradition, that's where Wei Qi, the surface Qi, homes back to Yuan Qi. So it returns, and we have that ability to cycle, right? So Wei Qi is going in here, and then we're taking that Jing essence, that source Qi, and we're now circulating up. And it'll come back to do this again, right? To go down up to do 20, and then back down to do 1, and up again. Right. So we're doing the microcosmic orbit basically, circulating the Jing, and we call that also. There's you may have heard of this term, washing the marrow. Right. You are trying to purify and cleanse the marrow. Right? And marrow is what's inside the bone. Right. And when we look at the head, the cranial cavity is called the sea of marrow, right? And what is it? There's flesh on the outside, but it's encased in bone, right? So whereas we think of the marrow as the essence inside the bone, the sea of marrow makes perfect sense from that perspective. All right, so we're circulating the Jing, and in so doing, we're trying to connect to that thing that we call the Yu Qing, all there is, the spiritual realm, right? And we are going to transcend the senses by opening up the sensory portals here. So in a sense, we're doing, what do they call that? Cerebrospinal?
Impulse.
Craniosacral, thank you.
But cerebrospinal impulse.
Right. But craniosacral therapy, we're actually, I think that's an offshoot of this, right? But they didn't credit Gahung apparently. But you notice that we're rediscovering the wheel all the time. Trigger points. Trigger points? Ashur points. Right? We've always had Ashur points. Trigger points.
The core. The core.
The core. All right, so now we want to look at Erdon. Refers to the ear. So this is the elixir of the ear. Right? So we know that the ear relates to the kidneys. The ear, the kidney opens to the ear, and this is getting to the constitution. And we also remember that if we look at the primary meridians, lung, large intestine, etc., down to gallbladder and liver, that there's a sense of a continuum. And I could say that the first four deal more in Wei Qi, the second four deal more with Ying Qi, and the third four are approaching Source Qi. Right? After liver, you're basically going into the constitution. So I talked about, for instance, liver yin feeding the liver, the kidney yin of the genitalia, and also feeding the brain, right? Or I could say liver blood banks to kidney yin. Right? That's the way the expression is done. And it's going from the zangfu organs to curious organs, right? And the curious organs deal with source qi and the 8 extraordinary vessels. So the gallbladder is the link between the zangfu organs and the qifu, or the curious organs. You may also remember that from the Taiyang urinary bladder pathway, as it proceeds along the head, I believe there's a branch, I think it's from UB7, that goes down and then connects to these points in the ear. So these are gallbladder points, but they're also a collateral of the urinary bladder pathway. So there's some play between the Taiyang of UB and the Shaoyang of the gallbladder. Okay. So we look at these points, gallbladder 7, gallbladder 8. Let me get the names of them here. And you basically palpate them for sensitivity. So we know that, again, folding the ear and feeling the top of that, right, that's going to give us Sanjiao 20, and then going up for the first depression is going to give us gallbladder 8. Gallbladder 7 is anterior to that, about half its sun anterior. But the measurements are less important than the actual depressions, right? So we know that acupuncture points now are called shui, or they're called caves, right? That there is an opening, and a cave invites you to go inside. Originally they were called kung, which meant emptiness, right? But later they were transformed into shui, and it's almost like there's a mystery inside that cave. There's something waiting to be explored. And then you have to palpate that, right? You have to engage in that point, in that cave. So it's, I think that's something that's missing a lot now, that we do a lot of academic discussion about things because we can do that in the classroom, but how do you actually palpate them? And that's a very personal thing, and that Wei Qi to Wei Qi, hand to hand, that physical contact is very important, that you feel it and the patient feels it. Right? And I want to just digress for a second, like I haven't digressed enough. I have a patient who's a 20-year-old girl who has a kind of a lockjaw. It's not officially that. The irony is her father is a dentist. And he's, worried out of his mind. She hasn't been able to eat solid food for almost a year, right? And it took a while to get some of the history. The first thought is, well, I'll open the upper hinge and the lower hinge, right? And I'll do LI4, go to the face, and I'll do stomach 44, cruel mouth, open that, Didn't work. Didn't work. And then I noticed that she's kind of like this, So I've spent a lot of time, trying to beat down gallbladder 21 and open up the, release some of the spasm there. And then after a few visits, she tells me, I used to play soccer and my sesamoid bones fractured. Oh, when was this? Sometime in grade school. Okay. And then the next treatment. Oh, I didn't tell you I had a hernia operation, inguinal hernia operation when I was 6. oh, that sounds important, you know? There was some kind of weakness within. That was, the foundation was sinking, and then on that side of the inguinal hernia, that side was collapsing. So I just recently said, all right, I'm preparing for this class, right? Let's look at gallbladder. I palpated gallbladder 7, 8, 9, and without thinking, okay, so speech, the jaw, this looks good, we'll clear the head. It was, gallbladder 11 was this, she felt it, I felt it. That it was like, okay, that's the point. And it so happens this is called yin portals on the head, and it matches the last point, gallbladder 44, the Jingwell point, which is yin portals on the foot, right? Now, what are the yin portals? Usually the yin portals you think of as the urethra and the anus, right? These are the lower portals. But what are the yin portals on the head? My assumption is that they relate to the yin sinews, the round circular ones of the eyes and the mouth, right? These are the first ones that the renmai, that comes up, circles the mouth and goes to the eyes. These are the first ones that we can control, right? Obviously, we have to be able to control our bowels and our bladder, or not control, but be able to use them. Those yin sinews are open, right? So, I mean, a baby, the first thing they do is that they attenuate to the daylight with the eye muscles, and then they suckle with the mouth muscles, right? So, that's my interpretation, is that GB11 and 41, to release that, are going to deal with these types of portals. In any event, it is important to palpate these points, right? And GB7 and 8 are more associated with the eyes. GB9 and GB7 deal with the speech and the jaw. GB10 for the speech and the inner dialogue. I think it's important to look at that critic that we have, right? For instance, if you're up about 2 a.m., if you can't sleep and you're not doing something, if you find you can't sleep, what is the nature of that inner dialogue? I don't know about you, but I have never had a good conversation there. There's this sort of list written in permanent ink of all of your failures, you know, and we just go through that. So it really is a discipline to say, I can't make that go away, but I can turn the volume down on that, right? In other words, I have the choice, I have the ability. If I can't make the critic go away, I can at least say, I don't give you any power, right? There are other things I can listen to. And there's a certain discipline of saying, I'm putting this in a box and I'm not going there. If I can't do anything good, I can at least not do anything wrong or bad, right? And it sounds wimpy, but it's a positive step, right? To not hurt yourself is a positive step. So these are a lot like window of the sky points in terms of clearing openings for you and creating new possibilities for you. All right, so the Huandan circulated things, it circulated Jing, and it gave us an ability to look at to connect to our emotions. So we weren't afraid of change. So we were willing to change, and we were willing to look at things, and some of the things that we looked at were our emotions here. And now we're clearing the sensory portals with the Erdan. At this stage, Goheng talks about gu. And it happens that Shui gu is gallbladder 8. Shui gu leading into the valley. So gu can be translated as valley, but it's also what do we grow in the valley, and that tends to be grains. This is a bit of a leap, but you have to understand Chinese are really into homonyms, homophones, I should say. Words that sound the same, right? And if you moisten the grains, what grows on the grains is gu, right? Which you could call worms, or perhaps better to say larvae. So I don't literally mean, they don't have to be literally worms, they can be larvae or bugs, something like that, right? And then ultimately, gu refers to desires that are potentially toxic to us. And so desires can be can end up being toxins, right? So part of what they do is try to reduce the what you're eating. Sometimes you reduce grains, but specifically no pork, no beef, no lamb, no dog, and dark dogs are eaten in the winter in Asia. That the fat content of the dog is supposed to keep you warm. No raw fish, sorry sushi people, spices or grains during this time. So there's a specific idea of trying to reduce things that will create more desires, that will create more complications. He's kind of talking about, carbs here, right? And it seems as though Americans or Westerners tend to eat more protein, but they're more protein tolerant, whereas Asians tend to, their food pyramid is based on grains. And my time in Taiwan, when you went out to dinner, the first question was rice or noodles. Right? Dinner was going to be one of those two, and what are you going to have with that, basically? So I believe that Asians are more carb tolerant by nature, by the history of their diet. But they're not used to eating so much protein, right? And Americans tend to eat more proteins, but they're not that good at handling all these carbs now. So that's the kind of a cultural difference here. And for instance, we look at, from Chinese medicine, spleen qi deficiency generally is diarrhea, loose stools, right? But then we see spleen qi deficiency in Americans with constipation. They're spleen qi deficient, but they have constipation. And it's probably more that the Asians are eating more grains and the Americans are eating more protein. And the protein is harder to digest, so the spleen qi deficiency here is denser. It's leaving us with denser matter. So that's one of those things that we have to embrace Chinese medicine. We have to also say, let's take it out of that culture, put it into this culture, and understand this culture. So there's some titrating that we have to do. We have to be somewhat flexible. All right, so one more thing about these last two that clear the head. Gallbladder 11 also clears sinus problems. And Gohung makes a point that the sinuses, when blocked, create a certain static breathing process. And this stuck pattern then can create a mood that we're stuck in. And of course, that mood then affects the way we see the world here. GB12, Wangu, the last bone on the skull, if you picture it that way, brings things to conclusion. If not, the pattern enters the Jing as seeds for the next incarnation. So this idea of the ear representing the constitution, the Jing, the essence. And we have the ability to clear the sensory portals, to clear the head. And then, in a sense, wash the marrow, cleanse the marrow as we circulate the Jing to make new choices, to see things differently. Okay. Liandan, refine the elixir, the sixth step. We no longer need society to measure the progress. Becoming refined like gold, the incorruptible metal. Being present without effort. So Jing is already circulating among the three treasures, the Chao portals to Du20. The Shen arises from Du20 and then is directed downward to the gallbladder ear points. All right, the Lian Dan points are, we have to see the pattern that they form. So this is definitely esoteric acupuncture here. So if we look at the axis of the navel and X and Y axis with the navel here, stomach 25. That's where we're starting. Going up to stomach 23, kidney 18, and then Ren 15. So we're starting like that. Opposite side, spleen 18 is fourth intercostal space, but a little further out. And then kidney 24, and then Ren 19. What is that? It's the Big Dipper. It's the Big Dipper. Take that, esoteric acupuncturist.
Whoa.
We're creating the Big Dipper here. And so if you notice on a lot of the Taoist charts that they have the Big Dipper on the top. And when we take the Big Dipper and we rotate it, we form the upper dantian, the middle dantian, the lower dantian. Right? So this is saying, as we refine the elixir here, refining our energy field here, that it's necessary to follow heaven. It's necessary to follow. So the Dipper, gives us a direction. The Dipper points to the North Star. So it's our compass basically. So let's talk about the points. Stomach 25, and I apologize for writing small, but this one's stomach 25. Tian Shu, the heavenly pivot. That's where we're starting. Stomach 23, Tai Yi, the supreme oneness, the second of the 10 celestial stems, signifying the primordial unity of yin and yang. Stomach 23. Up to kidney 18, Shi Guan, the stone border. Inside the stone is the marrow. So we have a heavenly pivot. We have something to rotate, or an axis to rotate around. We have the unity of yin and yang, and now we're going into the marrow, right? Then up to Ren 15, Ju Wei, the turtle dove tail, something to that effect. Idea of raising the Shen. And by the way, this was left side for males, right side for females here. And again, I don't think that that's that important, but your intention is important. Spleen 18, Tian Shi, the heavenly stream. Right? So we have an axis, we've united the yin and the yang, we're into the marrow. What was fifth? Oh, that we've raised the Shen, and now we're streaming from heaven. And to kidney 24, Ling Shu, the soul's wilderness. Right. And then to Ren 19, Zigong, the purple palace, right? When we have the pole star, the purple palace is the area around the pole star that we see the heavens circular, or turning, spinning with the. So Zigong is the name of that region, and then we have the pole star, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We left one out, huh? Ren 21. Xuanji, the jade pivot. Up. Thank you. I'm going in the wrong direction. That's Xuanji, the jade pivot here. So that's a kind of a compass, a celestial compass. I think that's pretty far out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the points that are not on the red channel, you're just doing on one side.
Repeat.
The question is the points on the Ren that are not on the Ren channel?
Yeah, you're not doing this bilaterally.
That's correct. I am not doing it bilaterally. I'm on one side and then crossing over. Yeah. All right. We've cleared the head, we've circulated the Jing. We've tried to reduce desire. Now we are on the 7th step, Rodan, which would be soften the elixir. So now we're doing moxibustion. And kidney 12, so remember the pubic bone is going to be kidney 11. Kidney 12 on one side, kidney 13 on the other. Kidney 12, Daha, the great manifestation. Kidney 13, Qi Shui, the cave or the depression of the Qi. We're doing moxibustion here. And we're going to alternate back and forth as a sort of a seesaw effect here, right? So moxa softens the elixir and it's said to travel up to the brain. Then the moxa also is going to activate the yang. And then we look on the back and we do the outer shoe points. So long before I ever heard of Gehung and his technique, if you study the points, even TCM couldn't get rid of the spiritual nature of the outer shoe points, right? I mean, there's just something about them. So you want to start at the bottom here. UB 52, UB 49, UB 47, UB 44, UB 42, right? So the door of the paw, it's the lungs. The tongue, the hallway of the Shen. The gate of the soul, of the Hun. The abode of the E, or the mindfulness. And then the residence of the will, or Zhi. Now we're talking about the lower border of the spinous process of, right? T3, T5, T9, T11, and second lumbar. Right. So the level of the lung shoe point, the heart shoe point, the liver shoe point, the spleen shoe point, and the kidney shoe point. Now when you picture the spine and the scapula, and sort of these kind of three sacred triangles that we've already done the sacrum, and we've circulated the Jing from there. Now the outer shoe points are along the medial border of the scapula, and these points are done outward. So this is bilateral and outward. And the notion is that you all have a concept of SI11, right? That we call the wings of the heart. That this, if you had wings, they'd be attached to the scapula, right? And SI11 also opens up the chest in the front, but it's particularly good to, the scapula rides on the rib cage, right? And the ability to rotate and move that, if for instance, in Chinese, to be careful, we say shaoxin, shrink your heart. When you shrink your heart, you're pulling in your shoulders, and your scapula are going in like that fashion, right? So we're creating, so you're pulling your heart back in, right? The heart wants to explore the world. The heart wants to go out and conquer the world in the sense of understand, interact with things. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this fun? Is this scary? Whatever. But the heart's mission is to go out and find its place in the world and find, what is my destiny? How do I fit in? What do I want to do in my life? What's my purpose here, right? But sometimes we get some negative feedback and we shrink in, right? So that notion of the rounded shoulders and protecting your heart, right? The pericardium, the Shinbao, is wrapped too tight, and we can't breathe. Right? We're constricting ourselves. When you do Tai Chi, they say the form is big. You expand your chest. You allow the Qi to circulate, right? So this is what we're doing here. We're doing these points away from, if the spine represents the Jing, right? And then the inner shoe line represents the Qi. The outer shoe line represents the Shen. Right? So the anatomical aspect, the physiological with some of the psychological aspects, and then the psychological with the spiritual aspects. So the denser is the bone. And as we move away, we have the blood and the emotions, and now we have the spirit. Right? So we are asking the spirit to fly freely. We're inviting the spirit to redeem itself. So this is to release the remnants of the mind. This is to return to the mystery. And Gong says now it's time to restore or to give birth to the 10,000 things so we can come back in time now. Isn't that nice of him? All right. The 8th step is called Fudan, the hidden elixir. Softening to become invisible or hidden is what we just did. Now we're beyond acupuncture. Now we're transcending acupuncture. So we use visualization, moxa, or acupressure. And the meditation for this is practicing without practicing. Practice without practicing. So you might call that wu wei, non-action. And it doesn't mean we don't do anything. The notion is that we are kind of just transcending our karma here. Right? So going back to being born and incarnating, we know that it's the Sanjiao that distributes source chi in an uneven fashion so that we become a type. Right? So we're a metal type, an earth type, or any archetype that you like. Right? In creating this uneven distribution of the 5 elements, or creating a certain type, that physical type expressed in the Jing then is going to react in a certain way because you're wired to react a certain way, but you're also going to draw in some type of lesson or curriculum here. As we evolve using these transformational strategies, the saying is that you transcend your curriculum. You purify your Jing, you cleanse the marrow, but you still are you. You become a more authentic you. Your primordial nature is allowed to express itself, right? So now I don't have to draw these lessons anymore because I've learned the lesson, right? And those of you that have experienced karma in your life, you may notice that there's a nice little message and we ignore that message. Right? Hey, it's a little bit louder and I don't have to listen to that, you know. Hey! And okay, you got my attention, but it's not enough to do anything about it, right? And then it's like, ooh, maybe I should do something about that. And then it's a car that rear ends you and you go, I definitely have to do something about that now, right? So what I'm suggesting is that the universe talks to you in a series. If we listen early, life is a lot better. If we listen later, what is needed to get our attention becomes more and more severe, right? So it's almost like the stitch in time saves 9. Listen early. And the same thing with illnesses, right? That nobody gets cancer right away. You have other illnesses that occur and increasing intensity. So when you go back to the history, you see, oh, you didn't just get cancer. You had other illnesses, other things happen to you. And the same thing here. So this idea of once I transcend my curriculum, I don't need to attract these lessons anymore. So the wu wei, which is translated as non-action, really means non-ego related action. I don't have to act because I need some particular lesson to learn. So now I help the grandmother cross the street because she's there and I'm there, and that's the right thing to do, and not because I get a Boy Scout merit badge for that. Right? I don't need to do it for myself. I do it because it's there. Right? So that's what I'm talking about, and that's what I think Gahung is referring to. Practice without practicing. There's no effort, and there's no premeditation for this. You're just doing things here. So what are the points that we focus on? And again, visualization now. You can do moxa, you can do acupressure, but you're also definitely visualizing now, right? So UB12, Fengman, the door to the wind, and again we're saying wind represents change and the ability to deal with change, right? UB12 to do 10. Do 10 is Ling Tai. This is Ling refers to soul, or that which captures the Shen, embodies the Shen, and Tai is a kind of a tower or a platform. If you were to go to a railroad station in China, it would have Tai in the character. It would imply something that is raised up like that, right? And then that brings you to do 11, Shen Dao, the way of the Shen. So so my meditation is I am embracing my ability to deal with change. I am going up to the platform from which my spirit, my soul can see out of, see what direction I should take to sort of get an overview of things. And then I'm going to follow the path of my spirit, right? And the path of your spirit is what gives you joy. Right? You are successful if you have joy. So this stage has us looking up into the wind, looking up at the dragon. So we ride the winds of change with UB11, and they say like a bodhisattva, you become like the wind. Right? You move not based on what you need, but you respond to what the environment tells you. And the spirit tower, we bring warmth and focus to leave the remnants of the soul behind. Okay? So that message is even the soul has a beginning and an end. Right? Shen doesn't. We return to all that is. But the soul, even the soul has a mission, and at some point that mission is over, right? Then we're up to the way of the spirit where everything has a meaning and everything has a purpose, where we're living a truly spiritual existence. And then we come to the ninth step, Handan. Han means cold, and the cold elixir is essentially embracing kidney yin. Forget about going anywhere, be still. So the meditation now, do 23, do 24. Do 23, the upper star, do 24, Shenting. Actually, you know that they're coming down, so but I wrote it this way. But in any event, the upper star and the spirit courtyard. So the star directs us, and the spirit courtyard implies that we're in a safe environment. You know how the Chinese homes will have an outer gate, and then they'll have a wall, and then somewhere inside there'll be a courtyard. And ideally that courtyard has, there'll be the wings for the different families on the side. But inside that courtyard is usually a 5-element garden. There'll be a water element, there'll be some stones, the Zen stones, bamboo, so there'll be something that represents the 5 elements. And the notion is that it's a safe environment because it's protected from the outer world, where you have the safety to be vulnerable. You have the safety to look at your spirit, to look at your Shen. Right? So acupressure, moxa, and I'm not a fan of moxa on the hairline. I'm not, I think the head's yang enough. I don't want to add more yang in that sense, but the acupressure or the visualization for me is enough for this. And then we look at, so this is the upper portion, and the lower portion is kidney 1 and spleen 6, right? 3 leg yin and the bubbling spring. So you see very clearly a yang aspect and a yin aspect to this kidney yin staying still here. Right? So the highest points on the front of the head, and then the lowest point of the foot, kidney 1, and then where the 3 leg yin meet or cross. Can you transcend the distractions of life by creating this cool nature, not aloof, but not attached? So I think a lot of Westerners look at this as aloof and kind of disassociated, and we can make that mistake. You know, we can suppress and pretend that we're there, but this isn't that. So there's an idea of you're sort of dematerializing, working on these upper points in the sea of marrow or the brain area, and then you're rematerializing with these lower points. And that's the meditation. So you dematerialize, you embrace the yang of heaven, and then you literally reconstruct yourself with kidney 1 and spleen 6, reconnecting to the yin of the earth, and that stage is called riding the dragon. So those are the 9 steps that Goheng gave us approximately, 1,700 years ago. I'll take any.
David, was that book? All these steps are in that book, or the oral tradition.
This is part of Goheng's legacy. I'm not. I don't know if it's in. It's probably in the Baoputsa. Yeah, but I don't know if that's what level of translation we have of that. Yeah. So I do have time for questions, and if you like, I can go over the pericardium and heart points. Yeah.
Can you list the 10 things again?
The 9 steps.
No,
Right?
sorry.
And is there an order in terms of you pick an order and do these in a particular time frame, or what is the procedure?
It just depends on your evolutionary process. Right? So I don't think that I don't think there's a specific time frame. This sort of implies that, I mean, obviously he was in a spiritual tradition and had spiritual guidance. And so you would hope to have the same, right? But the first was Dan Hua, and that meant the flower elixir, or the flourishing elixir. The second was Shen Fu, that was talisman. The third step, Shen Dan, or also San Cai, 3 treasures. What was Huan Dan, which was circulating the elixir. 5 was Dan, the ear elixir. 6 was Lien Dan, refining the elixir. 7, Rodan, softening the elixir. 8, Fudan, hidden elixir. Fudan, remember Fu from the same word for latency. Fu Qi, hidden Qi. And then 9, Handan. And this is the cold elixir. So those were the 9 steps.
David, the steps for Fudan, I only have here in matter 12, visualization or rubbing. Was there another point?
So you're talking about
Fudan.
number 8 now?
Yes.
Do my points.
Do 10 to 11. Oh, okay. It goes to do 10 to 11. Okay, thank you.
You got that? Okay. All right, so any other questions?
Of course. You know, whenever I'm in a class with you, the first thought I have is that, okay, so how do I utilize this in my practice? But after being in practice for 10 years, I have a different kind of, I guess, understanding of things like this, and it feels like the only way you could possibly ever use this in practice is if you practice it. Is there some truth to that?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. This kind of internal alchemy, spiritual alchemy, it's not for everyone, right? So for a number of people, longevity, anti-aging is as far as they're going to go, and that's nothing wrong with that. And that would be more lifestyle issues, nutritional issues, and you can do a lot with that. But that's not really transforming the body. So this idea was these are transformational strategies that will certainly, remember the word longevity is not just long life, but healthy long life. And if you look at the characters for sushi, longevity is in there, right? So the idea that eating sushi is supposed to be, and obviously we had an issue with raw fish in one of those steps, but probably for most of your patients, for most of your clients, simply trying to clean up your act is enough, right? And I don't want to be judgmental, and I don't want to be dogmatic about this. So with my patients, I just tell them I'm looking for balance. So when they tell me they're exhausted, and I say, well, you're using up more fuel than you're putting in the car, right? You're traveling further than you're putting in. You're running into debt, right? Or you're spending more money than you have in your bank account. You're creating a debt, an energetic debt. And usually what happens with patients is that they tell you, they don't say this knowingly, but what they're saying is, please help me return to the unhealthy lifestyle that got me sick. Right? I used to be able to stay up all night. I used to be able to work all week, go skiing on the weekend, party at night, and then go to work on Monday.
But there's a reason your body's complaining, because that ain't it.
Well, you used up your jing, sweetheart. You know, that's what happens, right? I mean, you used up your resources, and you can't do that anymore. So what I tell them is, we can borrow from the Constitution, we can borrow from the Ren, the Du, and the Chung. But you will shorten your lifespan if you do that. It's up to you, right? So I have people that tell me, I want to run the last marathon, but I hurt all over. Can you patch me up so I can run this marathon? And I say, all right, but is the human body really made to run 26 miles at a time? And didn't the first guy die after he did that? Shouldn't that tell us something, right? But that's okay, you know. And if you're a woman and you're running a marathon, and as you train for this, you lose your menstrual cycle, you stop your periods, right? This is kind of like a guy taking steroids. You're changing your constitution. If that's your mission, if your Ming in life is to be an Olympic marathon runner, God bless you and have at it, but know that you're paying a price with your constitution. So I have this patient who said, you know, just patch me up and let me do this marathon. So we did. And I said, okay, you know, you're borrowing from your future, right? And she ran the marathon, and then afterwards, what did she say? Can I do one more marathon? Can you hold me together for a moment? I said, no, that's, you know, you can do this with someone else, but this is where I draw the line now. I'm not going to be responsible for, I'm not going to reduce your level of Jing so that you can burn it out now. It's your choice, but I don't want to participate in that.
Right.
And so it's not, I'm not saying she's wrong, I'm saying that's not my purpose as a, hopefully at least not an inferior position, right? Other yes?
Yeah, speaking personally, if we wanted to do these transformational steps, how long would we spend on each one? And are there yardsticks to help us gauge that? Roberts?
That really wasn't transmitted in the 2-day seminar that I went to. Clearly, you start and you see how you're doing, right? So, and I think, you know, you view this with wonderful intentions, but how far do you actually get down the list, right? If you have the intention and you want to do this, then you will create the teacher and the method to do it. You will find that, right? So I don't want to tell you. I don't have a sense of how long this takes because I think this is a very personal and a very individualistic kind of a thing. But let me put it another way. If you try to skip ahead too fast, it's not going to work. Right?
David, can you touch on, look, you talked about the pericardium. Can you touch on some key points like Lao Gong that is used a lot in Qigong cultivation and meditative Tai Chi practices, and some of the other key points that are part of that teaching?
I think we have enough time to at least do the pericardium is the more important one, or the one we do first. So pericardium 1, Tien Sure, the celestial pool, the celestial pond. So this implies from heaven the rain comes down to the earth, right? So this idea, Tien, heaven, the earth. So we come from spirit. We come from heaven to take form in earth. So pericardium 1 implies that this is we are the pool of heaven's energy that has solidified on the earth. So this is where we come from. Right? Pericardium 1, one sun lateral to the nipple, right? Fourth intercostal space. So this it is also a window of the sky point, and that implies that this is something that opens our eyes to new possibilities. Right? Pericardium 2, Tien Chuan, the celestial spring, actually implies more the idea of evaporation and the reciprocal aspect of, so I have come down from heaven, but I am receptive, I'm reaching back towards heaven. I'm receptive to heaven's influence. Right? So one going down and one going up. Then we have Chu Zi. Zi is a marsh or a swamp. Chu means at the crook or the bend, right? And so pericardium 1, pericardium 2, Tutsun down from the axillary crease here, between the heads of the biceps brachii. We know lung 5 is on the radial side of the tendon here, and this is going to be on the ulnar side of the tendon. So the marsh at the bend, and this implies, marsh implies muddy. Right? So we may have a sense of we are connected to heaven and we are supposed to respond to heaven's energies. That is sort of an interactive universe, if you will. Right? The knock knock, slap, crash, right? Now, pericardium 3 for when things are muddy, when we can't see the next step, cloudy or muddy. So we're asked for some kind of clarity in life. Shiman is the cleft gate. We know that Shi cleft points are good for stagnation and pain. And my life is all muddled, my thinking is cloudy, I don't know what to do. So I try to work through that, but then I discover there's a lot of pain in my life. Everything I do causes me a certain amount of pain, right? So pericardium 4 allows me to break through some of that stagnation. Right? Basically, I want a smoother flow in my life. I don't want the tightness in my chest, the anxiety that I'm experiencing, right? So pericardium 4 will help that passageway. Pericardium 5, Jian Shi. Jian implies some kind of a segment, and Shi implies a messenger. So we call this an intermediary or a messenger. and this is the messenger from above. This is when you pray. I want guidance. Right? So, you know, I've been through these steps. I've gone through my muddled step. I'm dealing with the pain, and I want to make a Buddhist point here that life has pain. That there's no getting around that. And even as a protective parent, where you would say, "Oh, I'll take the pain for my child," you can't. Right? So, having a physical body, being a spiritual being inside a physical body, there's pain. There's some kind of pain involved. But what is the relation of pain to suffering? You're going to have pain. That's going to be in your life. If you understand the nature of your pain, you don't have to suffer. So we can have pain without suffering. If you think that the world is random and things happen to you, that you're a victim in your life, then you're embracing suffering and you don't understand the nature of your pain. Okay? So we can control pain. I work with a channel, and that channel says that pain is 20% physical, 80% emotional. And I really believe that. I firmly believe that. And when you're experiencing pain, if you can go to that witness, that observer place, you can call it soul, whatever you want to call that, but that something that gives you that separation, that detachment from the immediacy of the pain, and you say, what level is this pain on 0 to 10? How can I localize this pain? Where is the pain? Does it radiate? Is it hot? Is it stabbing? And because our first inclination to pain is, I don't want to look at pain. And what is the Western idea of pain? Analgesics, right? Don't experience your pain. I have a headache. I have a tough headache. I need tough pain medication to deal with a tough headache, Like, wow, you're really macho. You have a terrible headache and you take strong drugs. What kind of message is that? Your solution to your headache is to deaden the pain and not look at what causes it. Fundamental flaw in Western thinking. So, pain and suffering. If I understand the nature of my pain, what is it trying to tell me? I can work with my pain. My pain is a message. It's an alarm system going off in my body telling me something is wrong. Right? We just keep shutting off the fire alarm. We don't do anything about the fire, right, with analgesics. All right, so that's my pain issue, and I need some guidance to understand the nature of my pain. All right, so pericardium 5 is saying, I want help, I'm open to help. And when we ask for help, we actually have a chance of getting help. If we don't ask for help, you're not going to get it. Right? Naguan, the inner border, I want to say that mun is more like a door, and that door implies it goes to the surface. Guan is more like a gate or a gateway, and that implies it goes into the interior. And the interior I'm talking about is the zangfu organs, the blood, the vessels, right? As opposed to the constitution, which would be the bone and the essence. So Naguan says, I've been through all of this, I've asked for help, and now I need to look inside. I need to look inside at my emotions. I need to look inside my inner being. Who am I? Right? And remember, pericardium 6 is also the opening point for the yin wei mai, the yin linking vessel, right? Which explores the zang organs, which explores the blood and the emotions and the shen. And how do I feel inside my body? Right? Who am I? How do I link together the cycles of Jing? Why do I have a sense of I'm still the same person who was a baby? I'm still the same person who was the toddler, the teenager, the young adult, right? I can still, if I read my writing of a journal from high school, I identify with it. That's still me. But all my atoms have changed, my thoughts have changed, my emotions have changed. But there's still something that tells me I'm still me. That continuity from the 8 extraordinary vessels is the yin wei mai, the wei mai. But it's also perhaps the soul as the observer that doesn't change, it just sort of adds. Then we move to Daling, the great mound, the burial mound, the earth point at the wrist crease here. What do we need to put to rest? What demons are haunting us? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to sever the energetic connections? What are we financing subconsciously? What haunts us? What are we obsessing on? Right? This is what we need to put to rest. And P6 is particularly effective for that. I believe more so than, say, Heart 7. Right? That's
P7.
I'm sorry, P7. P7, yeah. I believe P7 is more effective than Shenmen or Heart 7 for that. Okay. And then we move down to Lao Gong. How am I doing? Okay, we're over. All right. So Lao Gong is the point about where your middle finger would rest, or if you go between your index finger and middle finger, right? You feel that depression in the palm here, right? And if you're going to needle this, try to avoid the creases of your lifeline and whatever, right? You don't want to you don't want to puncture your lifeline. What I'm saying is it's painful to needle through the lines. It's just there's more resistance. So Lao Gong is the palace of weariness, and it raises the issue of the U Lao, the 5 Lao. And we know excessive walking injures the liver. Excessive standing injures the kidney. Excessive sitting injures the spleen. Excessive lying, as in lying down, injures the lung. And excessive looking injures the heart. So these are the 5 taxations, and they're expressed in Lao Gong here. That what am I holding on to? What am I doing too much of, right? If I have liver qi stagnation, sometimes I need to walk to break up that stagnation, to circulate my qi in my blood. If I walk too much, I'm going to exhaust the liver, right? If I try standing and not moving. Stand for a while and not move, and your low back hurts. Your kidney area feels that. Sit too long, and it'll affect your digestion as well as your thinking process, right? Lying down too long, and you become more exhausted. You think you need to lie down because you're sick, but you have to get up and then lie down again. Even though lying down is the position of metal, too much of that it hurts. And then too much, it used to be reading or looking, but now you might think of, what do I do playing video games, right? I'm sitting and looking, right? This is a bad combination for our youth. Excessive sitting and then doing those video games. So they're not walking, they're not they're doing. That's another issue, right? But so this ulao. So this is the point that the Qigong masters direct their energy outward. And I believe one of the reasons that Qigong masters sometimes have shorter lives is that they are, yes, they're supposed to channel the energy from heaven and earth and extend that out. But sometimes their own energy is involved in that. And I think it's a very altruistic act. But Qigong masters tend to lead a shorter life. Yes?
What is the intention, I guess, of overlooking in terms of injuring the heart?
So we know the heart opens up to the eyes, and the Shen is expressed in the eyes. If I read books, let's say I'm a researcher and I'm using my eyes all day, right? Maybe looking through a microscope or something like that, and then I go home and I read journals, right? I'm exhausting my eyes. So the idea is that my Shen is going out the eyes here, and I'm exhausting them. So it doesn't. So I can have my eyes open, but if I'm not necessarily focusing or I'm not staring at something, this implies a certain level of concentration. Again, video games is that intense kind of a thing. So there's a difference with TV and movies too, by the way. Or let me put it another way. When you go to a movie, you're seeing the whole image and then not, the whole image and not, the whole image and not. So it's there and not, there and not, there and not. So you see something moving. A TV is an electron gun that beams things across. It's never all there. Your eyes are working harder to create that image. It's like doing this all the time, right? And that has an effect on us, right? So I think if you do the couch potato thing of sitting down and watching television, you're really tired after a while. But you're tired in a way that your body isn't tired, but your spirit is tired. And I seriously, that watching television is an exhausting thing to do if you do it a lot of hours. I mean, it really is a disturbing situation, you know? So I actually think movies, you know, projected on a screen are easier to do, and you tend to just do one and you leave, you know? Whereas that boob tube can stay on forever. I got 2 minutes, I got 1 point left, okay? Jung Chung, pericardium 9, right? So, Jung means middle, Chung means to penetrate, could be a thoroughfare, a highway. We're talking about the Chung Ma here. And returning to the original blueprint. That the Chung Mai, in its circulation of Jing, in its control of the unfolding of Jing, this is your blueprint, right? And we've just tried to refresh the blueprint, we've tried to wash the marrow, we've circulated everything, we've changed our perspective. So this is returning back to that original blueprint. Why did I come here? What was my intention when I reincarnated? What was my soul's mission, right? Can I look at that now in a new and innocent way and return to that? Despite all the experiences, can I learn from the experiences and not be weighed down by them? Right? I think that's part of the transformational strategy that we have to look at. Right? So you might palpate these on yourself and see what's most sore, and that might be an indication of where you are in your journey. Or maybe you have an owie.
Well, we're right up to the hour. I think Dr. David Chan, as usual, has just totally amazed us with this presentation. He can only put it together the way he does it, and just amazing. So thank you so much.